Good evening, everybody. Thanks for sticking with us. I've been nursing a glass of wine for about 3 hours now, so I'm glad it's my turn. My name is Luke Whaley. I'm a researcher in geography at Sheffield, and I'll start at the beginning. I was born a blonde-haired, blue-eyed boy in Zimbabwe, Africa, and my parents tell me, and it's confirmed by photographs from the time, that I was always to be found outdoors amongst the soil and the shrubbery of our garden, playing with insects and sticks and stones, and covered in dirt. And some of my earliest memories from that time are of the families, the Hargreaves, the Powells, Metcalfs, and Monroes, the friends and relatives of my own family, all of them white, who would gather to socialize on our lawn under the sun or play tennis on the tennis courts in the corner of our grounds. And I also remember the background figures, the gardeners, the nannies, the cleaners, all of them black and ever busy with the business of taking care of our household and the people in it. And at that age and stage, and to be honest, for some time afterwards, I never really questioned this situation. It just seemed so natural to me, the way things are. But my parents had itchy feet, and when I was 6, we left Zimbabwe and we moved to Australia. And 3 years later, we moved from Australia to South Africa. And by the way, if you can't pick up on my Southern African roots and my accent, I did used to talk a lot more like this. But over the time, we've moved from place to place, and my accent has gone a real transformation. And now I talk like this. But just respect my man at the bar back there. So in 1998, my family and I moved from South Africa to here, the UK. And as I went through higher education, I became increasingly interested in water, how humans manage water, use water, share water, and fight over it. And when I finished my PhD, I was lucky enough to land a job as a social scientist on a large interdisciplinary project looking at rural water supply in Ethiopia, Malawi, and Uganda. And as a team, we were trying to understand why, of all of the hundreds and thousands of boreholes that supply water to rural villages across Africa, at any one time, roughly a third of these aren't working. And on the social science side of the project, one of the methods we were using to understand this issue was participant diary keeping, where we worked with people who lived in 12 villages in Malawi and Uganda, and for a whole year, these people would record a diary and they'd capture their day-to-day experiences of managing and accessing and using water. So whilst as a sort of team, the problem we were trying to tackle was a very practical one, the sustainability of rural water supply, in these diaries we began to see another aspect of this challenge, one that goes largely unrepresentative and unnoticed. And what we were seeing in the diaries were aspects of people's worldviews, of their beliefs and their common sense knowledge, and how these worldviews shape their behavior, including their behavior to do with water. So, for example, in one village in eastern Uganda, we were working with 2 diary keepers, both called Betty. And the 2 Bettys captured how at certain times of the night, people in their village were scared of collecting water because of demons around the borehole. And in the early morning, for a similar reason, people wouldn't go to the borehole because of a skeleton that was there. And as one of the Bettys said, if you disturb it, it will get you. Now, one of the really interesting things about this is that my colleagues from Uganda and Malawi who I was working with on this project, for example, staff from the NGO WaterAid, they readily discussed how these sorts of beliefs were widespread, but they refused to accept they had anything to do with rural water supply, with a modern development project. How could something that is about tradition have anything to do with progress? How would something that's about the past have anything to do with the future? In another village, this time in Malawi, a diary keeper called Chiquita noted that many times there was a really long queue at the borehole, and people would get frustrated, tired of waiting and watching other people push in front of them. Arguments and fights would break out. And Chiquita notes that some of these people could be practicing witchcraft, and as a result, if you got into a fight with them, they may curse you. And so she, if she could, would choose, when there was a long queue at the borehole, to go elsewhere, even if it meant she had to travel much further, or the water was expensive, or the water quality wasn't very good. So when people's lives are hard and time is precious, and maybe clean water is in short supply, not being able to go to the borehole at certain times of day or night, say because of demons or skeletons that may be there, or to collect water from certain water sources for fear of being cursed, has a very real impact on people's lives. So when it comes to questions of rural water supply, people's worldviews do matter. But a focus on worldviews leads me invariably to think about my own worldview, as well as the worldview of others. The examples I've just given you about beliefs in the supernatural, but of course beliefs in the supernatural exist everywhere across all societies and at all times. For example, in the US, 8 out of 10 people believe in angels, including the majority of non-Christians. And on this side of the Atlantic, in the UK, a third of people believe in ghosts, and 1 in 10 people claim that they've communicated with the dead. And then there's this question of witchcraft, which comes up quite a lot in my research on water and worldviews. But witchcraft, and by the way, no term really carries more baggage when applied to the context of Africa. But witchcraft, of course, is not a peculiarly African term at all. It too exists everywhere in different forms in different places, including here in the UK. So, for example, a recent study in the UK showed that beliefs in witchcrafts and demon possession account for around 1,500 child abuse cases a year, including murders. And these cases have to do with rituals and practices that are designed to rid these children of the evil that's believed to exist within them. So the singular term witchcraft seems to capture a wide diversity of culturally specific beliefs and practices. But more than that, witchcraft is an English word. So when applied in African contexts, it has even more possibility of simplifying or misrepresenting. And this is something I'm really aware of in my own work. Working as I do through a translator and with local field assistants. So for example, earlier I mentioned the case of demons and skeletons at the borehole, but these are English translations of Lugwere, which is the language that the two Bettys write in. And so words like demon or skeleton may conjure up in my mind something completely different to what the two Bettys meant and what it means to their community. And if we go back in time, for example, to colonial Kenya, then the word witchcraft, which I was speaking about before, was used by the British colonialists to label a whole range of so-called native beliefs and practices. So for the colonial rulers in Kenya, witchcraft came to symbolize everything which was backwards or traditional or uncivilized about Kenya and its people. But this was because the colonialists in Kenya were guided by their own worldview, one based in no small part on Enlightenment beliefs about progress, about improvement, and about racial hierarchy. And this leads me to my last point about worldviews, because you see, I am a product of the colonial worldview. How else can I explain that in the 1980s, I, a blonde-haired, blue-eyed boy, could be playing on a big green garden in Zimbabwe, surrounded by my white family and family friends, and looked after by black servants and helpers? So, the colonial worldview didn't just disappear when colonialism came to an end. It carried over and it continued to inform international relations. And perhaps this is no more the case than with international development itself, which was and indeed continues to be guided by beliefs in progress and improvement. So a focus on worldviews helps me not only understand how looking at people's beliefs and common sense knowledge fundamentally shapes my own research topic, rural water supply, it also helps me to understand why these beliefs have been ignored for so long. Let's go back to my colleagues in the NGO WaterAid from Uganda and Malawi, who refused to accept that these beliefs we were finding in the diaries had anything to do with a modern development project. So I'm kind of left with this question or this quandary. How do I communicate the findings of my research about worldviews to those people who do development, the donors, the NGOs, the governments, when they may not see my focus on worldviews as relevant to development. And this is something which lies at the heart of my current project in Uganda, but that's a story for another time. Thank you.